We're going to go ahead and get started. So, hi everyone, good evening. It's really wonderful to be here with you all tonight for the first of our When Readies Retire events. This is hosted by the Foster Schultz Club. My name is Tess Buchanan. I'm a Readie myself, class of 2021, and I've had the pleasure of working with our speaker tonight to put together this event, and I'm really excited to be your host. Before we get started with tonight's program, I do have a little bit of housekeeping. Stephany's talk is prepared to be followed by a question and answer session. This is a really large group, so I do recommend setting your view to speaker, which will highlight Stephany as she talks so you can see her. To make the most of our time together, please do feel free to use the chat to submit questions or comments during the talk. My colleague Sonali is going to collect those questions as the talk proceeds, and at the end, we'll work through as many as possible. Again, there's a lot of you, more than 60 so far, and the number's still going up. So lastly, this presentation is being recorded and it's going to be made available on the alumni website for future viewing. If you don't want to be recorded, do feel free to turn off your camera. And with that being said, I'm really pleased to introduce our speaker this evening, who is Stephany Watson, class of 1982. Stephany majored in history and literature and wrote her thesis on Dickens' Bleak House. She has practiced law in Portland, Washington, D.C., and Olympia, Washington for 40 years. She's been in private practice, worked as a trial attorney for the U.S. Department of Justice, and as an administrative law judge. She was an arbitrator for the securities industry. She lives with her husband, Tony Fisher, Reed class of 1980, in a converted church in Lake Oswego with their 4 cats. With that, Stephany, you can take it away.
Thank you. Thanks for zooming in, everybody, and for rescheduling. I got hit by a bus. I mean, I really got hit by a bus. My car did. Anyway, I'm fine, but it's a funny coincidence because a lot of us say, if I get hit by a bus, when we're talking about things that we might want to do in the case of our deaths. What I'm talking about this evening is easy and important stuff to do before you're dead. I probably should have titled this talk, Easy and Important Stuff My Family Members Should Have Done Before They Died. I have a lot of sources of experience here, beginning with my brother and I cleaning out, donating, consigning, or trashing everything in my grandmother's 2 homes, my mom's home, and my father's apartment. And despite my youthful appearance, I have practiced law for 40 years. So I've seen a lot of things professionally and have the pleasure to know a lot of people who tell me their stories. My dad, Larry Watson, was a super healthy 70-year-old when he fell on the stairs while bringing a chafing dish up from the basement of a friend's house for a party. He jogged in the park every day. Dad never regained consciousness and died about 2 weeks later when my brothers, sisters, and I made the difficult decision to terminate life support. My dad was, bless him, was the most gregarious person you would ever meet. He had hundreds of friends. He lived in Denver and did business in Denver for decades. And when we'd go out to dinner, the High Larrys were everywhere. So when we went to clean out his apartment, we were really dismayed to find that we had no way to respond to his email or voicemail. His box was full, and he was a prolific emailer. He loved email. Dad didn't have a will. He was single. We found a safe deposit box key, but no information to go with it. And it was, we were very sad, obviously. Nobody expected dad to die at 70, somebody who jogs every day. But what made it worse was trying to solve these problems and notify his friends when we really had no way to do so. My husband and I faced similar issues when his brother died unexpectedly after heart surgery. I'll tell you about these experiences, and I'm going to give you some ideas about how to avoid the problems that my family and I encountered. First, get rid of your stuff. I mean, listen to me. Get rid of your stuff, no matter how young you are. If you're a hoarder or if you have OCD, get in touch with me. I'll put you in touch with somebody who can help you, or I'll help you myself. I am serious about that. I'm completely sincere. I'm really good at it. I love to get rid of stuff. I do it all the time. I go to Goodwill every month. I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I am aware of what it's like to, be grieving, probably have traveled, probably interrupted your work schedule. You don't get time off for bereavement, and then you get somewhere and it's trashed. It really sucks. More stories. My grandmother had two large homes in the Nebraska Sandhills. She was married to my grandfather. He and his seven brothers, who were Swedish immigrants, homesteaded on the prairie. And, we had a very large ranch. The ranch was larger than the footprint of the city of Washington, D.C. And we had many buildings there. In the summers during hay season, we used to feed 40 men a day, 3 times a day. And it was very remote. It's about 300 miles from Denver. And God knows how people fed all these men before there was Costco. But they did. So when my grandmother died, my brother, this time my mom and I, spent weeks in remote areas sorting through photos, dishes, linens, paperwork, and Tupperware. And I mean, I remember the Tupperware better than anything else because it was crap. And there would be hundreds of containers. We took vacation leave to accomplish this. My grandmother hadn't lived in these homes for 10 years. So they were dusty. There were animals. We were afraid of hantavirus. And it was really nearly impossible to find people to help us haul trash, sell and recycle over 100 years worth of stuff. You're not going to have that problem, almost certainly. And that's really lucky. But I want you to know that I'm really experienced in what you find when somebody you love doesn't get rid of their stuff. So if you take nothing else away from what I say today, get rid of your stuff. And again, I know I'm hitting this hard, but if you leave your stuff, someone's going to have to clean up your stuff. Someone who loves you and misses you terribly. And so you need to think about what you'll leave behind. Attached to this is the need for you to spread information. Think about my dad, no passwords, no information. God knows if anybody ever got into a safe deposit box. I didn't. One of the things we learned about my dad that we didn't know before he died was that he had gone bankrupt. And that's a shitty thing to learn, frankly, at that time, at any time. But we, oh gosh, I guess I lost my place. I just want to, again, underscore, think about what you leave behind and spread information. For now, as far as spreading information like your passwords, you can do it low tech. I'm sure there are 100 ways to do this, and people have a lot better ideas than I do. But it can be as simple as written lists that you keep in a safe place, home safe, safe deposit box, telling people you trust and having them put it in an encrypted file. You need to remember that when you change your passwords, you got to fix all that stuff. So don't let it get moldy or it's useless to your heirs. And with regard to spreading the word and telling people where your stuff is, when my mom died, we found jewelry in her lingerie drawer, in her kitchen cabinets. And this is very common, much more common than you would think. Currency in books. I had a friend who, having found some currency in some books, went through his uncle's entire library. And, it was snowing bills. So if you're going through somebody's stuff, that's a place to look. This is one of my favorites. My brother found a $30,000 expired check to my mom. I had to get loads of her stock dividend checks reissued. It's doable, but unless you have a kid for a lawyer, it's hard to find somebody to wade into that stuff. And you definitely don't want to pay somebody $300 an hour to do that kind of shit. Let me see. My husband's brother, my husband Tony Fisher, is here with me, and his brother Rob died unexpectedly after heart surgery. He had numerous smallish bank and brokerage accounts in his name only, like under $10,000. And we don't know why he opened all these accounts. I'm laughing that he, was trying to get a free toaster or hair dryer or whatever. I know those days are long gone, but if anybody else has a clue why you need 15 or 20 small bank accounts in your own name, and he had a lovely marriage. He clearly was not trying to, hide dough from his wife. And that took his wife and her lawyer about 6 months to sort out. They had to open a probate in his case. And the thing is, time is money. So if you're taking 6 months to dick around with calling companies, firms, brokers, whatever, that estate remains open and you're paying your lawyer. So don't do that. Hey guys, don't send messages from the grave. I mean it. This is not the way to reveal your love affairs, your abortions, whatever. Don't do it. My mom left me a set of spiral notebooks, filled with her handwriting that she wanted me to read upon her death. Are you kidding? I put them in the trash. My mom was not a nice person. And, I'm already in therapy. I'd be in there every week now if I'd read that shit. And again, think about what you leave behind and what your friends and family are going to find. Do you want them to find love letters to somebody that you wish that you had married? I don't think so. So clean that stuff up. The corollary to no messages from the grave is if it's important, tell them now. Tell them that you love them. Tell them that you hate them. But if it's important, tell them now when they can ask you questions and you can talk about it. Don't leave a steaming turd for them to find. Okay. Give your stuff away. Give it away. If you don't want it, why are you waiting until you're dead? I love to give stuff away. If people admire something I have, chances are nearly 100% I will take it off and give it to them. And that makes me happy. The annual federal gift tax exclusion is $18,000. We are not going to get into tax planning in this session. You can sure ask questions and I can answer them or refer you to somebody to answer them. But if you have a lot of money, if you have $1 million or more, you need to see an attorney. I mean, if you have that much money, you can spend a few $100 to go in and talk to somebody and get organized. I can all but guarantee that that person will save you, if not money, heartache. They really do know more than you can find out about on the internet. And here's something also personal to me that my husband added to my notes, and that is with regard to the gift tax exemption, consider giving your money away annually rather than making people wait for it. My mom did not do this. And, my brother is a sculptor. And there were times he went without health insurance for decades. And she had way more money than she needed. And she should have and could have done this. So if there's a grandchild in your family in college, you have enough money to keep you. Think about giving that child money for tuition, books, board, whatever, right now. You will really get a lot of pleasure out of it. I can't believe I have to say this, but I do. Here's a pro tip. You are not responsible for your dad's medical bills when he dies. I can't believe how much misinformation is out there television. I just finished a book where this was a significant part of the theme. The book was written like 2 years ago. It was nonfiction, but Jesus Christ. Okay, so, the estate of the dead person is responsible for the dead person's debts. Probate provides an orderly way to settle those debts when there's not enough money. But you, the kid, the grandkid, that's not on you. Okay? And you may have thought this. A lot of people really think this, but it's not true. And tell anybody who says it's true that it's not true. States have estate and gift taxes as well. Most of them do. And different states have different state laws. So again, when you're booking an hour with your lawyer, ask her about them. Don't rely on the internet. Again, if you have enough money to be talking about this stuff, you have enough money to pay a lawyer. We need work. Let's see. For lots of reasons, if you're an unmarried couple, you absolutely need to see a lawyer. There are issues that arise between unmarried couples that do not arise with married couples. Significantly, when I die, I leave all my money to dear Tony. It is 100% exempt by the marital estate tax exemption. If you're not married, you're screwed. There's ways to get out around it, but you need to see a professional. Title as much stuff as you can in your name and somebody else's name, because that person will inherit that thing without going through probate. Obviously, I'm sure you know you can do this with homes and with cars, but there are transfer on death bank and brokerage accounts that will just seamlessly become the property of your survivor. If you get your shit together, even minimally, and you dual title bank accounts, cars, retirement accounts, houses, vacation homes, you're going to be 90% done. And without seeing a lawyer. And here's something that's cute. I don't know if this is in the Uniform Probate Code. I'm sorry, I forgot to check. But in Oregon, all you do in your will is say, please distribute my personal property according to the list I left with my executor or in my safety deposit box or whatever. What this does is it allows you to get the big stuff done first and then to tinker with things like people you want to give special books to, or your jewelry, or your diaries, or your stuffed animals. There are a million ideas, and you can tinker with it as much as you want until you die. And it's just a handwritten list. And that is new since I started practicing in 1985. And it really makes a lot of sense, because who wants to clutter up a will with all that crap and then you sell it and you have to change your will? Okay, you get it. Are you still with me? I'm afraid that I might be getting a little dry here. So time for some more stories. My brother-in-law, Rob, the genius, I'm not saying that lightly, he was a genius. So he had he was the one that had all those bank accounts, the toaster bank accounts, right? Okay. He had a safe deposit box in his name only. His wife wasn't on the safe deposit box, right? So he dies, and we know there's a bunch of stuff in there, largely jewelry of his and my husband's mom's. So go to the bank, and we find this out. Pennsylvania passed a law that if you die as a sole owner of a safe deposit box, even if it's in the will and sentence, and you say, I bequeath the contents of box 12 to Stephany Watson. Nope. Here's what has to happen. And it usually takes a lawyer. You have to notify the Pennsylvania Department of Revenue and the bank manager. Once the Pennsylvania Department of Revenue blesses this, the bank manager has to accompany you in to open the box. This is a recent law. I have researched it and found no other state with this law. The only thing I can figure out is that some gangster had gobs of diamonds and cash and loot and ditched the tax man by putting all that shit in a safe deposit box. So now you have to notify the tax man and have the bank manager hold your hand and go in and open the box. So find out, make sure if you live in Pennsylvania, definitely don't do this, but really your safe deposit box should be titled with somebody else. Here's another great story. So Rob, this is really interesting. Rob had childhood cancer in the 50s, and he was treated and mostly cured with radiation. And it was groundbreaking at the time. And he really wanted to donate his remains to the University of Pennsylvania, but he hadn't done anything about it. So when we were doing Rob's thing after he died and everybody spread out, one of his stepsons called UPenn and they stiff armed him. And I said, well, give me a chance. So I called and asked, introduced myself by what I do, and asked to talk to their general counsel, who was a peach. And she tried everything in her power to be able to accomplish one of Rob's last wishes. Unfortunately, they have limited storage capacity. She even looked to see if there was a missing cadaver or if there was a group of students that could quickly have another seminar or whatever you do with the cadaver, and that didn't work. So that was really unfortunate. Folks would love, 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 love to have your whole body for science. And if you want to do that, do it. I have a feeling that you can go online to a teaching hospital and get right to instructions for what you have to do it. I'll end this in a few minutes with an admonition that you have to have a will. But before I do that, if you're alive and kicking, a more important document for you to have is a power of attorney. And here's why. A power of attorney creates an agency relationship between you and your what is known as an attorney in fact. So if you get hit by a bus, our leitmotif for this talk, if you get hit by a bus, your attorney in fact can pay your bills from your bank account can cash your paycheck and all that other stuff. The best kind of power of attorney, the only kind really that you should have, is a durable power of attorney. The durable power of attorney survives your dementia. In fact, we sold our family's ranch with a power of attorney. Thank God, because my mom really needed the money. And speaking of power of attorneys, my mom was she was living in Seattle then, and she was kind of sliding towards dementia. And she really needed a new power of attorney. Well, the only way, my mom was a PETA, the only way she was, the only way that she would sign a new power of attorney was if we flew her attorney from Nebraska to Seattle with the documents. It took a day of sitting with her for her to come around to signing it in front of a mobile notary. You should know they have those things. They're very helpful if you need to sign documents in the hospital or whatever. But she wouldn't sign it well. She refused. But she did sign a new power of attorney. She died intestate. She had a lot of property, you guys. I told you we had a legacy cattle ranch the size of Washington, D.C., homesteaded by her immigrant father and his brothers. And we needed to sell that for her care. On a lighter note, please make provision for your pets. Talk to your friends and relatives. You might love to have them if you get hit by a bus. Third time. I learned that the Oregon Humane Society has a program called Friends Forever. And for a donation, the Humane Society will care for your pets and rehome them. If you have friends who don't want or can't care for them, check your area for similar programs or start one. And finally, you need to have a will. You really need to have a will. It's not that big of a deal, guys. And there's a variety of reasons for having one. One is that, for example, most banks will not, unless you have a durable power of attorney, most banks will not let you access a decedent's bank account without what we call letters testamentary. And those are what you get when you open a probate and apply for such letters. So you got to have a will. I'm sure you guys know a lot of this stuff, but you've got to have a health care power of attorney, sometimes known as living will, an advance directive. In some states, it's called a POLST, P-O-L-S-T. That's what they're called in Washington State. And, those things give your instructions about what you do or do not want to keep yourself alive. Do you just want to be fed? Do you want a respirator, etc.? And here's the thing, these things are useless if you don't share the information, like so much I've been talking about. Who needs to have this? Your doctors. They are so used to taking these things. Most records, thank God, are electronic now. They scan them and they become part of your records. Doctors in the hospital can access them if you're hanging on by a thread. Thank you. You guys have, I'm ready to take stories and questions, but my beloved husband wants to ask a question.
She's the legal advisor. I'm a recovering financial advisor. I just wanted to mention one thing that happens if you're a financial advisor when you get a phone call from somebody that says that somebody for whom you're an advisor has passed. First thing happens is that advisor has to notify the branch manager, and those accounts that are within the control of the firm, unless they are set up as a transfer on death account or have a beneficiary like an IRA account, or are joint tenants with rights of survivorship. If you haven't done that, it's like the gates to the castle keep come down. Nothing can transpire with that account until directed by someone executing the will through probate. Now, I only bring that up because we've had pretty volatile markets, and who knows, we probably will always have volatile markets. But you may think, hey, it's not a problem because I gave, if something happens to me, my advisor has discretion over my account and can actively manage it, until things get sorted out. And unfortunately, that's not the case. Unless the account is provided to pass immediately to someone else on TOD or joint tenants with rights of survivorship, or there's an IRA beneficiary, it gets locked up. And you have to wait however many months it may take for probate to get it sorted out. And if you remember back to the great financial crisis, that could have seen things dropping by 20 or 30%, which was pretty unfortunate for a lot of people who were survivors who happened to be going through that at the time. And one last thing is life insurance. If you think that your executors and heirs don't have a lot of money on their own, and you haven't taken the steps that we've talked about to ensure that somebody has access upon your death to those assets to pay what has to be done for funeral costs and all that kind of stuff, you might consider if having some sort of a small insurance policy, only because if your money is tied up, an insurance policy is the one thing that discharges funds tax-free, usually within a week of the death certificate being provided to the insurer. They're very, very good about it. So again, one way to make things easier for the people who love you is to ensure through one means or another that they've got a source of liquidity to handle things. That's it.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, I forgot to mention life insurance. I'm glad that Tony did. He's right about the 1 week. Life insurance is a contract. It does not pass through probate. So death certificate to life insurance company, check, done. Do you guys have any questions, or do you want to tell me any stories?
We've got a couple questions that have come in from the chat. Johanna asked earlier if the titling of something in another person's name only works if you have one heir, like a non-married partner, or if it also would work if you have an estate with many heirs.
It works if you have many heirs. They'll have to sort out carving up that asset, but sure.
France has asked about a silver and turquoise bracelet that's been on their arm since 1971. Their daughter knows that it's for her, but what will she need to tell the people at People's Memorial?
do the list that I told you about and spread that information casually far and wide. But a very simple dated upon my death, this bracelet goes to this person and you should be good to go. If there's somebody that you think is going to be prickly about any of that stuff, then it's a good idea to make it very clear to that person. I mean, you can really pull out the stops here. You could send a registered letter with a receipt returned to you with that advice if you're worried about it. Off the top of my head, that's something that I think you can do. But the little note is perfectly legally sufficient unless you think there's going to be an argument. I have a situation myself. I have um, I have four siblings. I'm the oldest, and my and three different moms. My dad was a serial monogamist, and my youngest sister, who's in her early 30s, I mean, she doesn't communicate with any of us. I haven't seen her since dad died. She's gotten married, she's had a baby, she's included none of us. And I wanted to exclude her from my will. So, but I wanted it to be clear why. I wanted it to be clear that I hadn't forgotten about her. And so I asked my lawyer to revise my will to say that while I love her very much, we're not close and I'm not leaving her anything. Next question.
Freya has asked, they have a family revocable trust, as did their parents, which avoids probate and identifies a trustee for the estate. This isn't something that you mentioned, and is there any reason not to use such a trust?
No, there is no reason not to use it. There's every reason to use it. Again, this is a little bit outside the scope of what I wanted to talk to you guys about, which was mostly sort of practical things that you could do with handy tools that you have around the house. But yeah, I've got a trust. My husband does. My brother does, and it's a really good way of placing any instructions, or I don't know if this happens anymore, but people used to want to kind of shelter some money because they thought that somebody was going to take their whole inheritance, follow the Grateful Dead through Europe, and be sad when their money was gone. They had a great time, but they're broke. And so trust can be used for stuff like that as well. Good idea.
Perfect. Okay, LD, first of all, thank you for taking such fantastic notes, LD Kirschenbaum. LD has
Thank you.
asked, when I leave on a road trip, I send a text telling the brood where my laptop is hidden and the wee notebook with my passwords. Is there a better way?
I'm sorry. Could you say that a little more slowly, Tess?
Absolutely, Stephanie. LD says that when they leave on a road trip, they always text their brood where the laptop is hidden and where the little notebook with the passwords is. Is there a better way?
Maybe, but that works. It works just fine. I People have the, the scale of concern about passwords getting hacked, privacy is infinite, it seems to me. I have I don't care, to tell you the truth. I don't have any secrets at all. I have gotten hacked. I've had my Venmo account hacked. I've had my credit card stolen, and I've had my identity stolen, which was really interesting because the FBI pursued the thief through trial, and by law is required to keep me CC me on all the pleadings that go along with that process. But oh yeah, and I my luggage gets lost all the time. But but I don't know. I have a low level of concern about it. The higher level of concern you have is when you want to put those notes in the safe deposit box, encrypt them, and so on. But I think what you're doing is fine. And I hope you're also telling your brood, you know, where you're going to go in case you get hit by a bus.
Okay. LD also says passwords are good to share privately. When I consider that all the accounts that have gone paperless, how will anyone know which accounts actually exist?
By a list is the simple answer I can give you. That's what I have. And again, circle back to sharing information. I have my husband and I do not have totally melded um, finances. And I have a few things that I pay myself and he does likewise. And I simply made a list of that for him. Now, worst case scenario, people, if these are debtors, they're going to find you when you're dead or whatever. They're going to send you letters. You know, they've got as many ways to find you as anybody else does, and more motivation to do it. Sometimes, in fact, all the time that I have done stuff for people close to me who have died, I have had to do forensics, you know, sit at a desk with a stack of envelopes and open them and figure out where those accounts are. If you can make it simpler for somebody by making a list, that'd be terrific. Yeah, and you can leave it with your personal representative is really the word, but everyone says executor because it's a cooler word.
While we wait for other people to submit questions, a couple of my favorite stories that have been shared. Eric talks about when his dad passed and they were cleaning out his place, they found a V8 engine from a vehicle that he hadn't driven in 20 years, which is even more incentive to get rid of your stuff.
That's unique.
I found an anvil that my dad had that he never once used in his entire life, but a blacksmith's anvil in the garage.
Well, did you call someone to pick it up? What world?
You have to. There's no
Put it
other.
on Craigslist. I mean, WTF? Call every blacksmith in the county.
It's probably one or two.
If I can just jump in, Tess. This is Tony. So I'm from a long line of Yankees, and they pass stuff down to each other starting in like the late 1800s. So when my mom passed, I wound up with my brother having to split up all these lovely things, as our mother referred to them, lovely things, china, silver, jewelry in the safe deposit box, furniture, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I have been lugging those precious things around with me since from the East Coast to the West Coast to the Pacific Northwest, because I somehow felt I was, it's what I should have done, or it's what I should do, because they were bequeathed to me and there were memories associated with them and all of that. And it's taken me until about now to realize, you know what? My kids have absolutely no interest in any of that stuff. And the best thing I can do is to follow Stephany's advice and get rid of it all. I don't need my father's stamp collection. I have no idea as of yet as the best way to get rid of it, but I know I need to do that along with my coin collection from when I was a little kid, and the silver collection, and the crystal, and all the unused stuff that's just been hauled around.
And you'd be surprised at the depth of the adage, one man's trash is another man's treasure. There's a consignment store in our neighborhood that supports a community theater, and they gleefully took my grandmother's porcelain figurines, just the kind of thing that you have in your house behind a lace curtain in Nebraska, and fancy dishes, etc. Crystal. It's also a great place to buy wedding presents. FYI.
May I ask a question?
Yeah.
Larry Randall. You mentioned nothing, as far as I can recall, about prepaid funeral plans. My wife and I arranged for those perhaps 8 years ago now. And when I had a debilitating stroke a little over 2 years ago, followed by the death of my wife 3 weeks later, I was ever so glad to have that in place for her. I was in no kind of shape to take care of anything regarding a funeral, and no family members anywhere near who were capable of interceding in that process. Another comment, I live now, as did my wife when she was alive, in a so-called CCRC, a continuing care retirement community, which covers you from independent living through skilled nursing, memory care, or assisted living, the latter of which I am now using. I have friends here, most of them in independent living, who have retained off-site storage to keep their stuff. And when asked, have they ever needed to retrieve anything from it, the answer almost entirely is never. So I can only say that there are a lot of crazy people out there. I endorse your implication to get rid of the damn stuff now.
Yeah, it's hard to do, but if that's really interesting, because I know people, when they're getting rid of stuff, kind of place their belongings in a liminal state like that. And if they don't need them for a month, then they chuck them. And if one has trouble getting rid of stuff, that's a terrific idea. But you're right, it's not supposed to lead to fossils.
Eric Johnson has a question.
Hey, Eric.
Eric says, a friend and her siblings have spent a lot of time over the years trying to sort out a trust. I don't know the issue there. What sorts of issues are there that would make a trust a pain in the butt, and how do you avoid them?
Well, infinite. Incompetent lawyering, the people who don't get along and refuse to follow the constraints set forth in the trust, people who, just like a will, you can challenge one as being made under undue influence. Those are just the things that come off the top of my head. I'm really serious about prickly relatives and, trying to head them off at the pass. Our housemate told us kind of hilarious story last night about a family where there was one or two people with sticky fingers. And during the funeral, they actually hired a security guard to stay at the house. That's not the dumbest idea I've ever heard. I'm sure that you also know that thieves know the internet too, and look at obituaries and go to addresses. That's a little on the edge of what we're talking about, but I can see, litigation over trusts that could last. And I'm sorry to hear that.
Kathy Scher has a question. What if the people who are going to have to deal with my stuff, my kids, are the ones telling me I should keep it? They think of my house as the museum of their childhoods.
Give it to them now and set a deadline. Okay, you want this list of stuff. Awesome. I'm so happy that you want it. I need you to pick it up and take it away on or before 30 days. And if they don't, see you later, bye. I mean, I'm super serious about that. Everybody has to get into the habit of getting rid of their stuff. One thing that helps people sometimes, I know it helps me, is think about how somebody else could really use or enjoy something that you're not using or enjoying. And it really is delightful to, I'm serious. My husband's mom had 4 or 5 strings of gorgeous pearls, and we just gave some to his son's fiance. She doesn't have any pearls. How cool is that?
Susan has a question. Susan says, I have a lot of correspondence emails that I have in my email account, and I have not been good about weeding out junk email. So I'm reluctant to share passwords with my kids because I don't want to share with them that personal correspondence dating back to 2005. Any advice?
Yes, a couple of things. One, and don't hate me. One is to get yourself a really good bottle of wine and log on and start getting rid of stuff or putting it, corralling it into files. Start with the oldest first and think of your task if you want, like Swiss cheese. You do not have to do this in one sitting, right? Just chew out the little hole of cheese, drink the wine, repeat, come back tomorrow, get more wine. And it really won't take you that long to get rid of it. The other thing I would suggest is that if there's stuff that they need to have access to that's not in your email, let them have access to that. Bank accounts, for example, brokerage accounts, sort of segregate that first, low hanging fruit, if you will, before you get a knife and fork and tackle the elephant.
Maybe one other idea, maybe you probably thought of it, but is just those personal messages that are for your reference only. Set up another email account, forward them to the email account, kill them in your main email account. And then if you don't want anybody to see them, nobody need know anything about that other email account.
That's a pretty good idea.
I think that's what I'd do.
That's what you would do because you have
I was sneaky.
10,000 freaking emails in your blog.
Does anyone else have any questions or stories? For those of you who are talking about having kids who are trying to, say they want your stuff, I had a friend whose mom brought all the kids together and gave everybody colored dot stickers and said, you get to go through the house and you get to stick dots on the things that you want. And when you're out of dots, you don't get any more stuff. And then after that, she pushed all that stuff to each of those kids and got rid of the rest of it because they hadn't claimed it.
It's really amazing what you know, like you have a thing in a place and it's been there forever and you don't really think about it. You don't think about getting rid of it, but you also don't, it's not even there for you anymore. You know, a friend of mine is breaking up with her husband, had to repaint her house and take all her stuff out of it. And it was like, whoa, this looks great. Sorry, Tony. Tony can't help himself.
I was just going to observe because of what happened to my brother. I'm 69. When he passed, he was 69. He was just staring retirement in the face. He desperately didn't want to retire, but that wasn't going to be what he wasn't. He was going to be thrown out the door. His knowledge was just too old. Anyways, I'm pretty sure, and he was the kind of guy who I think a lot of Rudies can probably identify with. It was like his work absolutely was top priority. His second priority was his wife and his stepkids. His third priority, or maybe fifth, was himself, his own stuff. And so I imagine that what he had planned to do, being a very logical person, was, well, you know, when I'm retired, then I'll take care of all this shit that Stephany has just been talking to us all about, you know, because I know I need to do that. But unfortunately, he didn't have the time to begin to even think about doing that. So, you know, some of us newer members of the Foster Schultz Club, you know, I'm kind of preaching to us because we're now at that place where, okay, just heard this talk, and now's the time to you know, to start to think about it, to embrace it. I can also fault myself because for a long time, for like 5 years, my wife has been saying, "Do you have a will?" No. Well, you know, I'll get to it. And the main reason I didn't get to it was because I hadn't sat down on the patio with her and said, you know, this is what I kind of want to do to take care of my stepkids. Yeah, I mean, my kids, your stepkids. Not to screw you over, because I want to provide for you, but I want them to have something. I felt it was a conflict that I wanted to avoid. And thank God I didn't. And, you know, when we had the conversation, all of a sudden it was like, well, that makes perfect sense.
Right.
And then
I was totally unreasonable.
yeah,
I was a flaming asshole.
yeah, but I mean, it's very, you know, for me, that's, I think all of us, it's easy to want to avoid conflicts because why else wouldn't we just get a will and trust, you know, ginned up? There's something that's weighing on us. But usually, as in the world of trading, the adage is do the hard trade. You're supposed to do the hard trade. And those are hard things, but man, do they pay off. The minute I had gone through that exercise, I felt so much better.
Right. And you can definitely reward yourself. You know, I get a nice dinner when all of these china cabinets are cleaned out. Hey, I saw Miss Kirschenbaum, I think it was Lisa Kirschenbaum's name came up with regard to long-term care insurance. Most of us are probably too old to buy this. If anybody will even sell it to you, it would be prohibitively expensive. However, if you have children and grandchildren, it's wicked cheap when you're in, you know, under 32 or 35 or something like that. And it's a fantastic thing to have. I have personal experience with assisted living costing $30,000 a month. It's usually more in the $4,000 or $5,000 a month range. But if you know anybody who's young enough, that's really cheap,
Yeah, if I
buy
can,
it.
I can just maybe add a little bit to that. In the financial advisory world, there's considerable concern about long-term care insurance because normally the people who buy it are those who can't self-insure, meaning they don't have enough assets. And it's all great as long as you pay the premiums.
Oh yeah.
But, such a large percentage of our society winds up going into having to go through the Medicaid spend down so that they can be cared for by the federal government and the state. If you get there, guaranteed you are not going to be permitted to make payments on that long-term care insurance. If you, there are, if you're younger, oh, this is a funny story. So my ex-wife, when she was 55 for Christmas, I had been paid a visit by, I think it was Lincoln Insurance, and they had a product which actually made sense. It was, you give us $50,000 at age 55. By the time the insured is 75, for example, they'll have access to a guaranteed minimum pool of money of, I'm making it up, 250,000. And by age 80, it's 350,000. And the good part is, if whatever you draw out of that pool of insurance, whatever is left over ratably passes to your heirs. So it's guaranteed, it was guaranteed to grow by like 2% a year in terms of the death benefit to your heirs. So I gave this to her as a Christmas present, which she thought was pretty hilarious that I was giving her long-term care insurance as Christmas.
Note, she is his ex-wife.
Yes.
That is not a Christmas present, unless it's accompanied by a Robin's Egg blue box. Just saying.
But I mean, if some of you are, have kids who are in their 50s, for example, that's a kind of product that you should suggest them they ought to look into, because it doesn't require, you don't get in that catch-22 situation of, oh, I've got this policy, but now I need to pay $5,000 a year to keep it in force. And who's going to do that? That's all I had to say about
That's
that.
good. I didn't know about that. Thank you. Are we done? Anybody else?
Hannah's got a hand raised.
Hi, my name's
Hi.
Anna. I got long-term care insurance through my employer, probably starting when I was in my 50s, and became disabled in 73, in 23, a couple years ago. And my long-term care insurance is paying for my home health aid plus more than I'm paying for the home health aid. And I'm banking it separately. I'm going to be able to pay another year after the 6 years runs out of my policy. So, for me, it's working out.
That's a
I
great
started when I was in my
story.
50s.
That is such a great story. Thank you.
Muriel asks how long it should take to settle an estate after a death.
Completely depends on how well everybody is behaving, and how many debts, how much stuff is there. If you have a will contest, it can take a year and a half or two. If everybody's behaving, there's a requirement, this has been in place since I was a baby lawyer, that the personal representative of an estate has to notify all of the decedent's creditors, and they have 4 months to respond and present their debts. So that is the shortest period that I know of that you can close a state. I mean, I did my thesis on Bleak House. I imagine that you guys have heard of Jarndyce versus Jarndyce, which was the probate case that lasted for centuries. And it's not that bad, but there's a lot of ways things can get fouled up. Probate is to be avoided. Of the many reasons it should be avoided is it is all public. Okay, it is a public record, and to the extent there is dirty laundry, for crying out loud, especially if you're a person of some prominence or you live in a small town, God help you, that stuff is out there. So I would say minimum of 4 years, realistically 4 months, realistically 18 months for an average estate. I see a hand.
Got two hands. Rebecca, if you want to go first.
Sure. So I am 65 and I'm considering long-term healthcare right now, or long-term care insurance right now. And I have enough money. So I don't really know when it kicks in versus, so I have money that I could potentially self-insure, but I don't want to deplete my husband's if I precede him or get sick while he's still well, or even if he's not well, if he's still alive. I don't want to like completely drain our assets. So when is it not make sense to get long-term care? It's about $7,500 a year.
Wow.
And I'm happy.
I don't know how old you are, but
I'm 65.
That's a score. That sounds fantastic. And those, it's an insurance policy, it's a contract. So whatever its provisions are must be written in that contract.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of like what triggers the beginning of the payments. But good for you.
Okay, see, that does sound like a good thing. It also has the death provision that upon dying, that it would go transfer to my survivor, my husband. So that sounds good to you guys?
Yeah.
The details. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, France has a hand raised, and I think that'll be our last one for the evening.
So I think that people do need to be aware that there is a lag time between when you die and when your estate is settled. So, you mentioned like a wee little bit of insurance, so it could be accessed immediately. My mom had stocks, and stocks are not part of a will. So we were able to, she had written who the stocks should go to, her 5 children. And so we immediately got our 5th of her stocks, which made it possible for us to do all the other things that were financially involved in finishing the estate. So
what? I'm not familiar with that. I'm looking at my husband.
Well, yeah, it's very fact dependent, but in general, there has to, if you're a brokerage firm, you have to have instructions that you can legally rely upon, and to protect the brokerage firm against being sued. So my guess is that there were provisions in the titling of the accounts such that they could be immediately, it sounds like in your case, they were immediately, yeah. So,
yeah, they contacted me and said,
cool.
Hey, come get your money.
yeah.
That's really helpful because, as you know, there's funeral expenses and sort of moving expenses associated with clearing things out, and you may want to have a reception for the people that attend the funeral and so on. So having some cash around is very helpful.
And you can have checking accounts set up with a transfer on death feature.
Oh yeah.
savings
Any bank
accounts.
account.
And that is the sort of get out of jail free card, because otherwise you're going into probate jail, all those assets.
Unless they're very small, there's a procedure to access property. Thank God that's came into being when I was a baby lawyer, for small estates, small bank accounts, cars only, etc. But you know, for most of us these days, it's going to be enough money to trigger the requirement of probate, which is expensive, takes time, got to deal with lawyers, judges, etc.
Perfect. Thank
I
you.
like working, but I don't want to work unnecessarily.
It kind of goes without saying, but one of the benefits of setting up a trust is that the trust kicks in instantly.
Right.
And takes all of assets that are under control of the trust outside of the probate process. So it's seamless. It's almost as seamless as a transfer on death feature or joint tenants feature on account titling, or a beneficiary in an IRA, that kind of thing.
Thank you so much for being here. If you want to contact me, you are welcome to do so. Why don't you get a pen, and I'll tell you my email address, which is my first name and last name, STEPHANY Watson at MS Peterson, that's ON Peterson Ranch.com. Yes, it was my grandfather was Morris Sumner Peterson, and that was his ranch. So that's my domain name.
I have wondered about that since I met you, Stephany.
People go, you know, I'm an arbitrator for the securities industry, and I'll be on the horn waiting for people to show up. They're like, do you live on a ranch? Oh yeah, in Lake Oswego. Thank you.
Thank you
Have a
all
good
so much
night.
for coming together for this wrestling session. Keep an eye out tomorrow in your email for a survey on this, and some of the notes and top tips that people shared. I'll include some of those there. And thank you so much for being here. Keep an eye out for
Thanks,
more
Stephany.
retire events in April.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Talk to you soon.
Bye, folks.
Bye, Foster Schultz.